Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Future of Law, Leading Women in Legal Talk Shop. Before I introduce our speakers, Stacey Caywood, Therese Pritchard, Lisa Mayhew, and our moderator, Debbie Epstein-Henry, we have a few housekeeping items to go over. For the best viewing experience, please close any unnecessary programs or browsers, clear your browser cache, and ensure a strong internet connection. The audio for this presentation is through the internet only. You can use headphones or your computer and mobile speakers. This interaction is one way. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. If you have any questions, technical or for the presenters, please submit them in the Q&A widget, which I will touch on in a moment. Now, if you look around your screen, there are multiple application widgets you can use. For questions, technical and content related, please submit them in the Q&A widget, which is located directly below your slides. To learn more about our presenters and today's moderator, check out their bios to the right of your slides. To the left of your slides is a survey widget. If you would please fill this out about today's webinar, this will help us continue giving relevant content. I am now pleased to introduce today's speakers and say thank you for joining us. Stacey Caywood is the CEO of Wolters Kluwer Legal and Regulatory, a leading provider of information, software, and integrated workflow solutions for legal and business compliance professionals worldwide. Stacey has led the transformation of this almost billion-dollar business through strategic investment and technological innovation, with a focus on providing new value to meet customers' changing needs. With an emphasis on building global capabilities and collaboration in the business, she has led the division's development of global legal and compliance expert solutions and spearheaded several successful acquisitions, strengthening the company's position as an international leader. Stacey Caywood earned an MBA from Northwestern University, J.L. Kellogg School of Management, and holds a bachelor's degree from Tufts University. Moving on April 3rd, 2018, Bryan Cave, led by Terry Pritchard, and Leighton Paisner, led by Lisa Mayhew, announced plans to move forward as a newly merged law firm, Bryan Cave, Leighton Paisner. The resulting firm is one of the largest fully financially integrated in the world. And as far as we know, this is the first transatlantic law firm merger of its size to be successfully negotiated by two women. Therese Pritchard serves as co-chair of the firm. She was with the Division of Enforcement of the Securities and Exchange Commission and has concentrated on securities and financial institutions enforcement and litigation for more than 30 years. She has represented major public companies, banks, accounting firms, broker-dealers, investment advisors, mutual funds, hedge funds, and individuals under investigation by the federal government. In October 2013, she was honored by Securities Docket as being among the top 40 securities enforcement defense attorneys in the industry in its inaugural Enforcement 40. She was also named one of the best lawyers in America by various publications, including the Washington Post, Washingtonian, and Woodward White Inc.'s The Best Lawyers in America. Lisa Mayhew is co-chair of the global law firm Bryan Cave Leighton Paisner. She is a labor and employment lawyer by background, representing many corporates and financial institutions on their L&E issues. She successfully represented Merrill Lynch in the UK's highest value gender discrimination and equal pay claim and has undertaken a number of secondments to clients' businesses. She's also written numerous articles on L&E issues and a legal textbook on discrimination, remedies, and quantum. Today's discussion will be facilitated by Debbie Epstein-Henry. Debbie Epstein-Henry is an expert, consultant, and public speaker on careers, women, and law. For 20 years, hundreds of news outlets have featured her work, including the New York Times, NBC Nightly News, National Public Radio, and the Wall Street Journal. Debbie wrote 2 ABA best-selling books, Law and Reorder and Finding Bliss, as a co-author. She runs the DEH Speaker Series that hosts programming in New York City and by webcast, attracting more than 1,000 participants per quarter. She also is the co-founder of Bliss Lawyers, a company employing high-caliber attorneys who work on temporary engagements for law firms and in-house legal department clients across the U.S. And with that, I'll give it over to you, Debbie.
Thank you so much, Tara, for the generous introductions of me and my panelists. And a big thank you to Wolters Kluwer as well as BCLP. I'm just delighted to have the opportunity to facilitate this discussion. So let's get right to it. And I want to start with a question. I'll put it to you, Stacey, first. As you reflect about the legal sector transformation that is currently underway, what do you believe is the biggest driver?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, thanks, Debbie. It's a pleasure to be here with you and my fellow panelists. But I would say that, clearly Wolters Kluwer sees that the legal professional transformation is fully underway. And I would say that technology is a key driver of the change. And when you look at why, I think there are kind of three major factors. Law firms and corporate legal departments today are increasingly facing cost and price pressures, as all businesses are. Secondly, I think that they're really faced with growing legal complexity, and just the volume of information is very hard to deal with. So lawyers need to realize greater productivity and efficiency so that they, in turn, can provide higher value in their services to their clients and within their corporate legal departments. And then at the same time, I think there's a really big dynamic around the legal ecosystem that's developing. The law firms, corporate legal departments really need to jump in and be a part of it to really take advantage of some of the benefits. So I think what technology allows is to really help professionals address these challenges and take advantage of the opportunities in a couple of important ways. So foundational technology helps to automate and streamline work processes, including things from back office to legal research. And then beyond that, some of the new technology solutions allow them to go a step further, right? So leveraging things like artificial intelligence, predictive analytics to help professionals really change the game in terms of gaining more data-driven insights, as well as analysis to help serve clients more successfully and run their businesses more effectively and efficiently. So, again, I'd say that I think there's, no doubt that technology is really driving the global future of law, and that to be future ready, professionals need to really make the most of the technology that's available, starting, now.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and I think one follow-up on that, Stacey, is really what have you found to help with receptivity to all these technological changes? Because as lawyers, we're trained to look backwards at precedent to decide the future, and so that doesn't always bode well when you're thinking about innovation and embracing innovation. So, if you could just give a little insight about where you see lawyers adopting and sort of embracing the technology more readily.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting you raised that point. We recently were actually just compiling research that we conducted with an outside independent firm across 700 professionals. And one of the things that we learned, we actually asked questions around that. And one of the things that we found is that sort of through self-identifying through the way they answer questions, about a third of the professionals sort of categorize themselves as leading in technology. And that would, indicate that many don't consider themselves leading. What I found was interesting is that a big driver of that is the lack of technology knowledge, understanding, experience, or skills. An additional component was obviously the cost of adopting some of the technologies. But what we found is that the law firms that are leading in this area also see a nice ROI and improved profit as a result of it. So I think you're absolutely right that there's a challenge in sort of understanding it. I'd say that would be one of my big pieces of advice, takeaways in terms of what legal professionals need to do is to really start to get more prepared around understanding how technology can improve their practices.
So really nice segue, Stacey, in terms of the reference to improved ROI for law firms. And I want to turn to Lisa and Terry, just ask if you have any responses on the technology piece, and then also go into the drivers that you found to be particularly compelling in the legal sector transformation. So Lisa, do you want to start on that?
Sure, and thank you again for inviting us to participate in the discussion. I think I recognize everything that Stacey was talking about there, and I think from the external law firm's perspective and what we're feeling in terms of changing client expectations is that they are challenging the traditional approaches that law firms have been comfortable using for many, many years to service the work that clients ask us to help them with in a way that gives better value. So challenging the model of just charging with reference to the amount of time spent on the clock, because that doesn't necessarily drive efficiency or provide optimum value to the client. So I think what we are seeing is clients understandably turning to their law firms and asking how we might be able to deepen our relationships with them by providing sort of end-to-end legal services. So an ability to perhaps work more traditionally on some of the more complex work, but to find different ways of servicing more business as usual or high volume, lower value work. So trying to drive deeper relationships in a way that the law firms deliver value and can provide end-to-end services. And I think linked to that in terms of client expectations, I've definitely noticed a shift in the level of interest that GCs and in-house counsel at clients, they are interested in the strategy of the external law firms that they choose to partner with. So it's in their interest for the law firms to be evolving in the way that the clients are involving their businesses and are thinking about the future. That's why I definitely feel getting more questions around our own strategies, clients wanting to understand the direction of travel, wanting to understand how a particular firm might be different to another firm, particularly when, in some of the markets that we're in, there's a lot of great law firms and a lot of choice out there. So how are we different? So I would call those out as areas of changing client expectations.
Absolutely, and I like this point you're making, Lisa, about it in some ways mirroring the growth and direction of your clients in terms of the future vision of how they see their work environments and law firms see theirs. Terry, what would you like to add to this discussion around these drivers?
Well, around those drivers, I think it's been well said. I think I'm happy to say we're in the 1/3 of law firms that are very focused on using technology and innovation to improve practices and really to focus not on just giving advice but really delivering solutions to our clients. So I think it's right that it's one of the major drivers of our strategy going forward. I guess what I would add to that in terms of client expectations, to change the subject a bit away from innovation, is that clients also have expectations around diversity. It's probably not fair to say that the legal sector has been transformed yet with respect to diversity, but I do think it's improving. I think I tend to put the drivers with respect to accelerating the transformation in the diversity arena in 3 categories. First, our clients. Our clients are very focused on our demographic makeup, and they are insisting that the teams that work on their matters be diverse. I think clients could be even more helpful if they really begin to call the women or the diverse lawyers directly with new work, and to insist that the diverse lawyer be in charge of their relationship, because as we know in law firms, being a rainmaker with clients that turn to you is critically important. The second category I would say is more law firm internal, and firms need to be more intentional about creating more diverse leadership in their firms. We participate in the Mansfield rule, as I know many other law firms do, which requires that 30% of the pool of candidates we consider for leadership positions be diverse. It really helps us, I think, to think more broadly about the qualities we want in our leaders and who has those qualities. And lastly, we think it's critical to work hard to get as many people as possible invested, and especially rainmakers, invested in promoting our diverse lawyers. One of our most successful programs has been our sponsorship program, where we pair a successful mid-level associate with a rainmaker who's basically tasked with helping her make partner. And those rainmakers get very invested in the success of the younger lawyers. And this year, our class of new partners had 57% women and 22% were lawyers of color. So we are beginning to see the fruits of that and hoping it continues.
Wonderful, Terry, and I love some of those examples you provided. And just amplifying on that, I wonder, are there any other examples you're implementing, Stacey, in the Wolters Kluwer context to improve women and diverse lawyers' retention and promotion?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that at Wolters Kluwer, women are very well represented throughout our leadership in both the legal and regulatory division and across our corporation. So we have we actually have 67% of the divisional CEOs are female. So, I think it's really important that we continue to focus on that, but it is, very embedded in our culture today. I think one of the things that attracts women to Wolters Kluwer and, attracts talent in general is that, we really have a very strong values-based organization, and it certainly values diversity as one of those key elements. So, yeah, I think it's just, as I said, very embedded in our culture today.
And I think it's a real opportunity here having this discussion among three executive women as you are. And turning more inward, I'm curious if you can attribute any specific qualities and circumstances for each of you that have really made a difference in allowing you to ascend to the C-suite. And I'll start with you on that, Lisa.
Thank you. So this is always a hard one to answer in a way, especially there's a part of me that feels a bit of a fraud on this because my area of labor and employment is an area which attracts a lot of women. So a lot of women practice labor and employment as a specialist area of law, either in the private practice law firms and or in the in-house legal team. So I was fortunate enough maybe therefore to grow up in an area of law where, if anything, there were more women than men practicing it. That said, I definitely took full advantage later in my career when opportunities would present themselves which lifted my gaze beyond just my immediate narrow practice area and gave me opportunities to become more interested in my own business, in the law firm that I was a partner in. And so opportunities to be elected to the firm's board, to run a practice group, to advise my own firm on maybe some of its own labor and employment issues. So there were opportunities for me to lean into to really be curious and involved in my own business. And I think, taking advantage when those opportunities arose, opportunities create opportunities, and I'm a big believer in that you create your own luck. And so I think my sort of perspective on that is, if people have an aspiration to progress, then it's incumbent on them to be curious and interested in and to grasp opportunities that come their way.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and it's interesting as an expert on women's issues, I've asked this question of many women leaders, and I find it is often the case that they'll attribute a lot of their success to fortuity and there's a real gratefulness, which I think is terrific. But I also, in posing this same question to Terry and Stacey, I want to give you permission to be less modest and really share your, in that sense, give you permission to self-promote and really share what you think were those distinguishing factors for you that enabled you to excel when others didn't. So, Terry?
Sure. And I will say that luck does play a role, but I agree with you, that's not the whole story ever, or we probably wouldn't be here. I think Lisa gets it partly right, too, which is to say you got to be willing to put yourself out there, and women aren't very good at that. We tend to think that, if there were 10 qualifications for a job and we're missing one, then we're not good enough. And I think it's important to be willing to put oneself out there. I would say, speaking personally, and this isn't always a good quality, but at the end of the day, I think when you've been around as long as I have, it helps, which is a willingness to be direct about what you think and persistent about arguing for it if you continue to believe it's right. I think it's really important to be able to listen and process what you're hearing, but I also think at the end of the day, you got to say what you think and let the chips fall where they may, so to speak.
Absolutely, and I think there's a lot of interesting research around women in confidence, which ties in exactly with your point about having the courage to be direct and listen, but also have that persistence. Stacey, what's your take on this in terms of what you attribute? Yes.
Yeah. I think the first part about sort of the luck, I think definitely held true for me a bit, and then I'd say it's something that I tell others shouldn't be luck, but you should look for, which is what I mentioned earlier, sort of the values of the company that you would be joining or the law firm that you'd be joining to make sure there's a good match and one that demonstrates that they really do celebrate and are inclusive about diversity. So that, for me, turned out to be lucky that I ended up in an environment that was so, but definitely an important factor. And then I would also agree with Terry and Lisa that a lot of this is taking advantage of opportunities. I think women and just in general, we think about opportunities as promotions. And in fact, if you take advantage of the opportunities that might be in, your organization, in my case, within Wolters Kluwer, we do a lot of task forces that are meant to sort of bring people together across the organization to participate in, a challenge, looking at an opportunity that, we want to be able to address and succeed in. And, I was, I shouldn't say fortunate, I took the opportunity and made the time to participate in many of those task forces. And while my intention at the time was really to gather experiences, I was passionate about one I joined around innovation and trying to address a particular challenge around a legal segment. The result was that I ended up getting a lot more recognition. I was able to, present the task force findings to, the board of directors. So it really does, I was able to make myself much more, known within the organization and accomplished. But I do have to say that you have to earn your right to be able to participate in those and be able to find success. And one of the key things for me has always just been focusing on, one of my favorite values, which is for Wolters Kluwer, aim high and deliver. That, throughout my career, I've really focused on making sure I'm delivering against my commitments either to customers or to partners and certainly to employees, and that is job number one.
Absolutely. I think another element that you all sort of danced around a little bit, even though we didn't touch on it specifically, is smart risk-taking. I think that is something that many are reticent about doing, but when you've earned your stripes and you've been able to demonstrate the caliber of your work and your contribution, having the confidence to take those smart risks, I think, is another important component.
Yeah,
we actually have a question. excuse me, we have a question from the audience, and I think it's a really important dimension to this conversation, which is, how did your challenges ascending to leadership positions within your firm differ, you think, from women of color who are also trying to ascend? And I think, certainly what underlines the question is the double bind that women of color face. And do you have any recommendations along those lines of what you've observed? Lisa, I'll come back to you on that.
Yeah, I think that's, as you say, that's a double minority difference aspect, and I think it is tougher because that's just objectively the case, because we have even fewer leaders of color, in particular women of color, in business in general. I think in terms of the responsibility that leaders have to accelerate progress in that regard, I think it is a series of intentional public actions to try and change that. So, for example, in BCLP, we have a heavy focus on, we call it social mobility, but it actually overlaps in large part with, we would talk about ethnicity in the UK. I know the language in the US would be lawyers of color. And it's an intentional shift to make us think more broadly about the pool of talent we might be recruiting from. So we have blind CVs. So when we recruit lawyers, we redact the names, so you can't form an assumption about their ethnicity by looking at a blank CV. We also have some software that helps us at the graduate level recalibrate the qualifications. So, for example, if you are a candidate from a lesser privileged background and have gone to a less privileged school, and if you achieve certain level of grades in your, what we would call A-levels, then to get a B from a particular school might be at least as good, if not better, than getting a string of A's in a more privileged school. And so we strip out and recalibrate that so that we broaden the pool of candidates that we recruit, and that pool does stretch more into more ethnically diverse populations. That's just one example of an intentional action, and we have seen greater diversification of candidates in our new lawyers joining our ranks of lawyers. So I recognize it as something we absolutely need to work harder to address. And I think I am saying there is no one single quick solution, and it's an intentional series of actions from the top to the bottom and from the bottom to the top.
And I think that example of trying to make the interview process more blind is a really powerful one. And because with women of color, there's an issue with recruitment, not just retention and promotion, which is more the issue for white women. Terry and Stacey, anything you want to add on this point that you've observed?
This is Terry. I would only say that I think the implicit biases that women lawyers of color face are obviously even greater, and as Lisa said, we are working hard to not only to have blind applications when we consider hiring people, but also we're focused. Our litigation group has a work allocation program that we are testing, which is really primarily aimed at making sure the opportunities are equal for all of our lawyers, and it is to address the retention issue you just raised as much as anything else, because I think what discourages women, and I'm sure particularly women of color, is the lack of opportunity to really get on the big deal or the big piece of litigation, and so we try to focus on all of those issues to to make sure that we're addressing as best we can what needs to be fixed.
And the idea of focusing on assignments and how work is being shared is critical, as you know, in the law firm context, because it's all about access to the work and access to the influential partners and clients. The only other thing I wanted to add is just I'm heartened to hear about the sponsorship program you have in place, because whites are 63% more likely to have sponsors and men are 46% more likely. So for women of color in particular, it's critical to identify the people who should be sponsored and how to cultivate them. So great to hear on that program as well. I want to come back to innovation and our initial discussion and ask you, what has been your most important focus in driving innovation in your workplaces, and in turn, what are you most proud of? And Stacey, I'll start with you.
Sure. Yes, speaking on behalf of a global business, and we have about 4,000 employees in 14 countries around the world, I think that embracing that diversity while creating a shared commitment to a common culture of customer-focused innovation is key to our transformation as a business. And as important was creating a disciplined and very collaborative approach around how we innovate, so that we focus our investments, we align our top talent and engage customers, and then quickly try to scale the innovation globally to benefit more professionals worldwide more quickly. And then in the Wolters Kluwer Legal and Regulatory Division, we focus on innovation and foster it in many ways. So, for example, we use lean agile methodology to create really co-create solutions with our customers. We engage real time with them. We also have a new center of excellence around innovation, where we focus global teams on developing and deploying new solutions globally. And as part of our ongoing business, we hold innovation tournaments. We recently just were a sponsor of the Global Legal Hackathon, which is very exciting. And we also, participate in code games within our businesses. So I would say that, while overall the leadership and my team have put together this focus and the infrastructure, what I'm really proud about is that our employees within this environment, are driving this every day in a very collaborative way, so that the employees are really able to foster this co-creation methodology has been really a source of pride for me and for the business overall.
And it sounds like you've really integrated it into the culture by having this multifaceted approach of bringing innovation in. So I think that's really interesting. And Terry, I'm curious from your perspective, what are you most proud of in terms of driving innovation?
Well, I guess I go back a few years to Bryan Cave's strategic plan done probably 4 years ago at this point. And it had a couple of strategic objectives, one of which was international growth, and another of which was actually a focus on innovation and driving innovation. And I think that our merger with Berwin, Leighton, Paisner really effectively captured both of those strategic objectives. I think part of the reason I'm proud of the merger is because of our collective decision not to follow a merger model that really has been followed for the past decade, which is called a Varian structure, which is somewhat like a franchise model where there are separate financial pots throughout the world. And we instead did this merger as one firm with one financial pot, because we actually believe that the different structure would enable us to drive collaboration to new heights, and that would be beneficial to our clients, and largely because we can incentivize our lawyers to work together by having one financial pot. At the same time, this particular merger brought together two firms that were previously committed to innovation, two firms that had previously won all kinds of Law Firm of the Year type awards in their respective markets in the innovation space. So it also captured that strategic objective of really focusing on the use of technology in the delivery of client services, and also on legal operations, assisting our clients in their needs to run a more efficient operation internally. So I think from both of those perspectives, what I'm most proud of is having accomplished a merger that I think is well positioned for the future in many respects.
Absolutely, and congratulations. I know you're approaching your one-year anniversary, so that's fantastic. Lisa, I'm just wondering if you can dig a little deeper and share some examples around innovations that you've done with clients.
Yeah, so happy to. I think when you use the word innovation, your mind has a sort of a tendency to think, go straight to technology and computers and that aspect of innovation. But I think innovation, in my mind, is obviously much broader, and it means doing things differently in a changed way. And so what we are definitely noticing is clients are looking to the law firms they partner with to collaborate in a more meaningful and different, changed way to deliver, as Terry says, the solutions that they're looking for. So if I give an example, and it's a public matter which we won an award for, so it's something I can share. So one of our main clients is Heathrow Airport, and they're in the middle of building a third runway, which has been a hugely contentious from an environmental and other aspect situation. And so that is a project that's going to run for over 10 years. There's a lot of strands to it: antitrust, real estate, corporate, employment, zoning and planning, all a whole myriad of aspects. And you could see that Heathrow were worried and not convinced that they could put all of their eggs in one law firm basket, and they were worried that there wasn't going to be a single firm that could credibly and deeply service all of those requirements. So we went to them and we proposed something quite different and collaborative, and it goes against the instincts of competitive lawyers. And we proposed that we partner up with an entirely different law firm, a firm called Pinsent Masons, which is one of our big competitors in the UK, in fact, on the basis that we would each appoint a relationship partner and that both teams would be resourced with associates. We would work with one of the in-house lawyers at Heathrow, and it would be this sort of virtual team which would draw upon the best from both law firms and double the size of the resource that Heathrow felt rightly that it needed. So we pitched that to the clients. So we collaborated with the other law firm, and that co-counseling model is now in its second year of currency and is going very well. And it's a good example, I feel, of coming up with a more collaborative business approach that involved two normally competing law firms and the client, who was prepared to be very innovative in its approach to outsourcing this work. So I think that, for me, is a good example of innovation.
Absolutely, and I think what is so wonderful about that example is that clearly both you and the other firm thought about the client first, and this was going to be the best way to address the challenges of the client. So having the courage to bring in a competitor and collaborate with a competitor is really something that is laudable. So great example. I'm curious, and I think this is a hard question for each of you, and I want to encourage the audience to continue to ask questions, and I'm happy to read those off. But in the meantime, I'll start with you, Stacey, and ask, what are you most optimistic about regarding the future of law, and what keeps you up at night more than any other issue as you contemplate the legal workplace of the future?
Yes, I mean, as we talked about at the start, right, the legal transformation is clearly well underway. So in many respects, I think this is, the most exciting time. I've been with Wolters Kluwer in this industry for 26 years now, and it's just an incredibly exciting time for the profession. So I'm really, in general, really optimistic about it. I would say what keeps me up at night is what keeps my customers up at night, right? So really making sure that we are, walking with them step by step as they face new challenges and opportunities at what we see as sort of an ever accelerated pace. I want to make sure that, Wolters Kluwer is right with them side by side. So, that's certainly what gets me excited, but also, there obviously are, challenges in doing that. So really important for us to keep that focus on helping professionals achieve the outcomes that they need to be the most successful.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, what that requires for us is really making sure we continue to innovate and invest to make sure we can deliver on the expectations that our customers have of us.
Right. It sounds like when you're doing that, you're really working to anticipate the issues that are going to plague your clients as well. And so being one step ahead is a challenge in and of itself. So
yeah.
Go ahead. Was somebody going to jump in? So, Lisa, what about you? What are you optimistic about, and what keeps you up at night?
I am optimistic about us having reached a tipping point on, in particular, gender diversity. And, I'm not kidding ourselves that this is all thanks to the legal profession. This is aligned with a tipping point in society, the Me Too movement and all the scandals that have, been flushed out and rightly called out as being no longer acceptable. And I think the legal profession is changing itself. And I think we are still not seeing the pace of progress that we would want to see. But I am genuinely, for the first time in a good few years, I would say, feeling that we are arriving at a tipping point on that. So as somebody who's got two daughters, like Terry, another thing we share in common, I'm very pleased to feel that. In terms of what keeps me awake at night, lots of things. But, I do, having not long ago heard firsthand the story about what happened to DLA, the cyber attack sort of nightmare is something, if you allow your mind to dwell too much on that, you wouldn't get much sleep. So I think the sort of safety of our systems and all the data and all the things that are held on that is something that, I do spend time thinking about.
Oh, absolutely. Coming back to the technology discussion again and how it's kind of become bigger than ourselves. So I can absolutely see that. Terry, I have the same question of you, and I'm also interested to know from your perspective if your optimism and or fears have changed as you have, had this merger that you facilitated.
I don't. No, I don't think they've changed very much. I guess I don't stay awake at night worrying about how I'm going to accomplish a strategic international combination anymore. But I mean, for me, I think maybe it's a reflection of my age here. But what I would say, what makes me optimistic about the law is I don't buy any of this. Millennials aren't hardworking, and they aren't committed or loyal. I think the next generation is an incredibly talented group of young people. I think they're driven to do great work. I think they actually care about what made me go to law school 40 years ago, which was justice and fairness, and we see that through their pro bono efforts and in other ways. So I'm optimistic about the future of law because I think that the quality of talent coming into the law is still great. and I think they will take the law to great places. So that's my optimism. What keeps me up at night, I think probably similar to Stacey, at least on the business side. I think what I worry about is changing client demands and expectations, and whether we're doing everything we can to really meet those, or whether we're missing something and need to be changing in another way that would make us stand out and really differentiate us from the competition. On a broader side, I as a lawyer, I worry about kind of where the judiciary is going and whether our efforts to become more diverse and provide opportunities that are equal for everyone are going to be set back by some of the decisions of our judiciary going forward.
And I actually want to come back to your point about millennials, and there's a lot of generational tension among baby boomers and millennials in some circles, and then in other places you hear the more heartened kind of enthusiasm that you just shared, Terry. Just wondered if there are any particular tips that any of you have with regard to ensuring that there are the best lines of communication with the baby boomers and millennials in particular. Stacey, you want to start with that?
The best lines of communication. I mean, I would say in terms of, the younger talent that are coming into our organization, what's really important for them is to truly understand the company vision, the passion that they have really is important to them. So really enjoying what they do, making sure that they really feel like they are, delivering something meaningful. And to the point earlier, I think it is a very, very passionate group of people if you can engage them in the right direction. So getting, the right dialogue going with them. I mean, I think one of the things that we do is we have a talent summit every year where we're really trying to connect with the upcoming talent and ensure they really get a sense of, what are the challenges that the business are facing, hear from clients what their expectations are, get them together to work on projects together in a collaborative way, using sort of the hackathon approach so that they really do, feel like they are able to deliver and contribute, which is, I think, what's really of interest for this generation that's now coming into the workforce.
Absolutely. The idea of having an open line of communication and really engaging them in the process rather than just putting decisions upon them, I think is critical. And Lisa, anything to add on the millennial subject?
No, I mean, I completely agree with that, and I think they definitely do value a recognition and time that from the business that it regards it as being important to talk to them, explain the direction of the business, the values of the business, its purpose, where it intends to travel. So I think that, but also it's not just the words, it's also to have credibility that they feel that the business lives up to those words. And I think they have a real sense of looking around them and in particular above them and admiring hopefully role models in more senior positions that they respect, they admire, they like, and hopefully aspire to emulate. So I definitely agree with what Stacey was saying.
Absolutely. And we have a question from the audience about what to do about the continuing trend of women leaving big law. And we talked earlier about sponsorship, and Terry talked about having diverse leadership. But I wondered if any of you have additional ideas that could really stem the tide of women leaving law.
Would you like me to jump in?
Well, yes, please.
Yes. Okay. We have lots of ideas, and we try to implement lots of programs, from flex time to working from home to ramp up time after you've given birth, to special training programs and affinity groups, to allies programs, to the work allocation program that I mentioned. I think these are all designed to try to improve the work experience for our women and other diverse lawyers, and to create a work environment that enables them to, as I say, integrate their work and their personal lives in a way that works for them, and to recognize that everybody doesn't create the same balance in their lives or want the same balance in their lives, and that the role of the firm is to enable people to work effectively in whatever balance works for them.
Terrific. Anybody else want to jump in on that?
I would just add that I mentioned that in employment law there's a lot of women, so I would often find myself sitting down with female associates who were about to have children and go on maternity leaves, and sometimes they would sort of say, I don't think I'm going to come back with the same level of commitment to my job as I have now, and I'm going to opt out, sort of thing. And I would always say to them, careers these days potentially can span 40, 50 years even. So, the experience that you're going through right now isn't going to be what defines you for the entirety of that time. So unless you have a really settled view that you want to opt out, then and every conversation is deeply personal. Everyone's circumstances are very personal and different to them and their families. But unless you have a really settled view, keep your toe in it, come back in some shape or other, whether that's flexible working or part-time working or come as a contract lawyer, but keep your toe in the water, because it maintains optionality. And if you want to kind of rebuild or increase your level of commitment back to where it might be, then there's no one size fits all in terms of path to partnership. So I would always encourage people to have perspective in the context of what might be a very long career.
Absolutely, and I think the idea of having those resources available is critical, and I think for the employer representatives on the phone, something important is to also make sure that you're running workplaces where people feel comfortable accessing those opportunities and those policies and programs, that the environment is hospitable enough to do that, and that's the sort of other component to it. We just have a few minutes left, and what I want to do to close out our conversation is just ask you each very briefly to share one last piece of advice that is something you've learned along the way that has been helpful in your success and you had wished you'd known much earlier. So, Stacey, I'm going to start with you just very briefly, one last thought.
Yeah, I just reiterate what I had said earlier, that you've got to keep your head down and deliver against the expectations to your clients and to your team members, but then also to make sure that you make opportunities to expand your experience, to network outside of your formal official sort of duties and responsibilities, and make sure that you're connecting with the customer to gain experience of really what's going to drive the team's success overall.
Great. Lisa?
I was trying to think, the part of the question about what do I wish I knew before.
Yes.
I think to allow yourself to go with change. So, lawyers, we are, as we all know, a very cautious breed by nature. Our whole training is to spot risk. And I think I wish perhaps in my earlier career had a more relaxed or greater appreciation that change can, isn't something to be feared, but it can be really an energizing thing. And so I probably wish I knew that earlier in my career.
Great. And Terry?
You know, I have to talk to the first-year associates every year, and one of the things I say to them is that when I was growing up, my father used to say, if it was so much fun, they wouldn't have to pay you to do it. And I've done the complete reverse, which is to say to my kids, if you don't love it, find something else to do, because I really think it's so much easier to shine when you do love what you're doing than it is to not really enjoy what you're doing and still try to do a good job at it. So, you know, I think finding the thing that fits you and that you enjoy doing is just a super important thing. So
wonderful. And I would add the adage that perfection is the enemy of good, that sometimes we as women in particular are particularly difficult on ourselves, and to be able to embrace all of our successes and our contributions and do that with humility, I think is an important lesson. So with that, I want to thank this distinguished panel, Stacey Caywood, Lisa Mayhew, and Therese Pritchard, and also Wolters Kluwer and BCLP for co-hosting this webinar. And for our participants, thank you so much for listening. There is a survey that was mentioned earlier. If you can complete that, that would be great. We would welcome future topic ideas, and this conversation also has been recorded. So if you have friends you want to share it with, you'll have that opportunity as well. Thank you again, all of you.
Thank you.